there, I'm Una, and I'm a unicorn. And do you know what unicorns are bad at? Booking meetings. Except for me, of course. My secret? I use Cirrus Insight to schedule all my meetings. That's Cirrus, spelled C-I-R-R-U-S, Cirrus Insight. Cirrus Insight takes all the hassle out of booking and scheduling my meetings, cutting the amount of steps involved to half, if not more. Now, instead of a 43-message deep email thread where everyone's trying to find the right time to meet, I can just send them to a link on my calendar page. From there, anyone who wants to meet with me can see when I'm available and schedule a meeting. It's magic. Like me. And I should know a thing or two about magic. I'm a unicorn after all. But wait, there's more. Do you use Salesforce? If you do, Cirrus Insight can also remove most of the manual data entry involved with updating and maintaining your Salesforce environment. To learn more and start your 14-day free trial, visit cirrusinsight.com. That's Cirrus, spelled C-I-R-R-U-S, cirrusinsight.com. And tell them Una sent you.
Welcome to Serious Insights. I'm Kristi Campbell, your host. We're going to pick back up with our wonderful conversation about build versus buy in Salesforce with our co-host, Emilie Jensen. If you haven't seen part 1, give us a pause, go get caught up, and come right on back here. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and jump right back in. You know, just having a little grace, I think, for the things in your org that seem cringy.
So here's another fun, we've had our org for about 13 years.
Mm-hmm. Lots of growth. I've changed a lot in 13 years, so.
I don't know about you. I graduated from high school about 13 years ago. So I'm aging myself, which I really don't care. But it's, a lot changes, like you said. And there have been a lot of releases since then.
Sure.
For example, Territory Enterprise Management occurred winter 15. Guess what we don't have in our org?
Yet.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I had support turn it on. But here's a fun bug. Take a note, people. It doesn't add the namespace, so you can't run Apex to align your opportunities to your Territory Enterprise Management without a namespace.
Who knew?
Hard lesson learned from me.
Well, but and even at the time, right, I 4 jobs ago was using territories, and we had 2 different lines of business. And there was basically a conflict that if you had someone who sold, let's say, software and hardware, and there was an overlap, and it wasn't sure what to pick, it just picked nothing.
Oh yeah, it still does that.
even the right tool, mostly right, may not be the perfect fit, and that's kind of, again, is that considered acceptable? Is getting most of them taken care of so they're not manual, good enough, right? And then having as the admin or finance or whatever lucky person gets to manage the rest of them, or working on automation or something to fill that gap. Is that, an acceptable option? And I think, again, from kind of past job PTSD life, one thing that has been hard for me to accept in the past is, right, so we've got these guidelines, right? We are, we know our requirements, and we've gone and looked at solutions and priced them out, or, estimated hours and kind of presented the options. And sometimes they're going to pick the option you think is stupid. Sometimes you're not going to win because of maybe some other reason, right? Maybe it would require an external developer and we don't have budget for that. Or maybe it's just now it's not the priority and you have to be working on some other thing, even though you want to work on this. There's all these kind of, even if you make a recommendation, you may not win in some scenarios, which was tough for me in the past of well, that's dumb. I don't want to do it the dumb way.
Right. No, I mean, it's kind of interesting. So from a build versus buy perspective, that's such an interesting, it's such an interesting topic within it, right? For example, sometimes I would spec out options we could buy, and then I would be like, I could just build this in the same amount of time with the same result. And I don't have to present options to the CFO or the CSO. And I can just be like, I'm just going to build it. And they'll be like, great, cost savings, whatever, wash my hands of it. And then I get the solution that I wanted without having the fear of them not selecting the one that I wanted.
Yeah, true.
Right.
But then there's also something.
Yeah.
I mean, there is an opportunity cost to that too, right? Like there's what else could you have built in that same time, or what else, like maybe you're going to lose that budget that you had if you don't use it for something, like there's lots of angles, and then you're putting yourself in a position to maintain it, right? And do bug fixes, not even beyond training, right? Like, we, for example, our round robin model has been in place, and it's a little brittle, but it works well enough until now we want to do basically a weighted model, right? Of two, you get two, you get one, you get two, you get one within this grouping. And it's like, I can't do that. So either
that's some complex logic.
Yeah. So either we come up with, because right now it's based on public groups. So we come up with a way to, I can't re-add the same person twice to a public group, right? So, but is that enough of an impetus to shift to a more complex round robining model? Or do I, come up with some other solution that then is manual but works well enough for now until we get to, the third manual annoying thing. And then finally we can, maybe make the decision. But not even that's, or we keep working with what we've got and we try and have the systems inform the decisions of how we want to manage the routing.
Right.
Either way.
I think that kind of brings me to an interesting question that I have for you. Do you ever feel like you've built a solution or you've built like a system process, so you maybe, for example, you have a round robin system and it's semi-manual because the last part of the automation is just a little unclear. And then it's performed manually until you have all of the scope that you need to automate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do that all the time, but I'm not sure if that's a common, like,
I do think there's definitely phased approach piece. So, for example, we revamped our partner management program. So partners that sign with us to agree to, really consultants, right, to recommend and implement our product. And so obviously Salesforce has partner management tracking and partner communities and all that, which was a little heavy for what we wanted to do. So I built a partnership record that's a child to the account that defines the things of the commission percentage and really tracking the sales process for those partners. And then a junction object between that partnership and the account or opportunity that they're referring. And it's actually been a really interesting example of, in my head, I'm at the end. I know it's automated, it's tight, it's great. Accounting has what they need. My partner team has what they need. Everyone, like, there's no more spreadsheets with multiple colors and codes that only make sense to one person. But but other things have popped up. And so I finally had to get to the point that it's like, okay, so for right now it's a little more manual, but you have it, and I can start you with these reports and we can start moving you away from your spreadsheet. Do I want to implement Apex rollups so that I can roll up the referral from the account onto the account so that when you create an opportunity, it automatically associates that referral to the partnership? Sure, I can, right? Like, are there more steps of what I want to do? But I was able to get it to a good enough place to get them started using it and experiencing it and providing me questions. And then we can kind of get into phase 2, phase 3 to get it to perfection. Just kidding. It'll never end.
Full launch. No, I know, right? Like, I delivered it and I'm still delivering it.
Right. That is a tough, that does get into, I think, a tough, kind of ADD level or management level, right, of following up and like not just letting somebody do that manual thing for forever. Because I think it is kind of easy to, like we were talking about earlier, get in the habit of how it works and then to keep doing it that way and maybe not follow up and finish the automated piece because there's other hats to wear.
There's other hats to don, to take off the wall and put on your head. I think that's true. I think it's interesting, like I said earlier, sharing, the role of sales ops director alongside of myself also being an admin, because I just end up like sometimes just finding things I want to automate for myself, For the last 5 years, I've been approving opportunities, which is like, it just gets more and more voluminous every minute. It seems like there's just
a good problem to have, but yes, not good for your sanity, probably.
Well, I mean, the renewals team now does a lot of month-to-month opportunities, so I'm like, can you just book 4 months of this month-to-month opportunity, and I'll just cancel the rest if they want to cancel early? I don't know. So there's some like weird little business problems to solve within it, but beyond that, when I first started doing it, I was just sort of like, we had very cowboy and cowgirl, wild, wild west situation in our Salesforce organization. We had reps that were marking things close won without products.
Sure, who needs them?
In the future, there are some fun times. I remember finding an opportunity, and like I was doing a lot of due diligence reporting at the time, going to the rep and saying like, what exactly did you sell? What
do you think you did?
Can you tell me what I need to put on here so that the products make sense, so that fulfillment can actually ship the right stuff? And eventually we got that correct. But my point is that, we needed some like guidelines,
guardrails,
and boundaries for people. Yeah. And so we implemented an approval process, and, what I check, how I check it, it's evolved over the years. But, I think it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago. I was beginning my flow journey, and I was building anything I could in flow, and I just automated the heck out of the data hygiene that I had to do for approval processes. Now, the benefit was I had all the scope. I had 4 years of scope, or 3
from
years
your own
of
brain.
scope on on what I needed automated. It made perfect sense. I didn't have to communicate it to anybody. I had the skills to do it myself. Now, I think that that's definitely not how a lot of other places work.
Right.
You need somebody to articulate to you what they want and what they need to have happen. And I think that's where the conversation can get a little sticky. Like you said, here I built you a semi-manual process, and I need to follow up with you to make sure that it's still working or what needs to happen next in a few months. But then a year later, they're still doing that semi-manual process, and the follow-up's kind of fallen off your plate. And they're like, hey, so how about that? How do you get people to articulate that information correctly, I think is the next big step for most admins, Yeah,
what do you actually want? Yeah. That's an interesting, like being your own customer is kind of helpful, I think, right? Like you said, you kind of know what you need, but I also like the idea of considerations of things to build or buy for yourself, which I think can feel like a different argument. For example, when I started here, I asked to get Elements Cloud Catalyst, which ties into all your metadata, but it's got tagging and notes and descriptions. So as I go through and learn things about the org, someone has a problem that I have to go figure something out, then I can make notes for future me and like really do documentation right within the product. But I think sometimes it feels harder to make arguments for things that aren't customer facing, or time to optimize my workflows and process builders into flows, right? That's not sexy front end stuff. Like you're saying, like automating, using flow to make your day-to-day life better doesn't feel like the thing you would make time for if against those user things, but it's like really kind of equally, if not more important.
Oh, definitely. I mean, like ultimately, and this was like a long time ago, back when they were still using the term, I don't know what they call it now, like success coaching, Salesforce success coaching, and I'm sure it'll change next year or something. But back in the day, it was called accelerators. And I took an accelerator on data hygiene, and it like changed my life. Like that was so great.
I love it.
Because, well, and what it really helped me do was enable myself and other users to be data stewards. And I think starting with a data stewardship perspective, when you're thinking on a build versus buy conversation, can really help simplify a lot of the decision making. Thinking about, where is this custom field going to be used eventually? Like, is this solution significant to a just for now problem, or is this significant for a long-term business problem? I think getting users to define scope is so important in a timeline type of perspective versus just a what's the problem I want to solve perspective.
Right.
And that's something that I've definitely had to scope out with my users. Like, you really want this checkbox? Why? Define it for me.
Just the idea.
That's a really simple idea, but like I've had people recently come to me with tools of like, I really want this, and I really want it installed now. Right. And I've signed the paperwork, or I'm about to sign the paperwork for it. What do you think? And I have to give really quick judgment calls. And typically where I start from is how long are you going to be using this for? What is the intended problem, and why does it need to be solved today? And for how long do you think this problem will need to be solved for?
I think that's an interesting aspect of the admin user relationship. I think a lot of times, especially for me working at a Salesforce partner company where obviously my users are Salesforce aware.
Right.
I think sometimes they're more prone to come to me with solutions instead of problems.
Ooh.
And it's a really interesting difference, right? Like, what are you really trying to get at? Don't tell me you want a checkbox, right? Like, what are you actually trying to drive? When are you going to use it? Like, getting into those things, but like, don't do my job, let me do my job. But like, that's essentially kind of like, not that your opinion isn't great, but let me think about and ask those questions and come to me with the end goal, or help me get you to the end goal. So then I can kind of figure out the journey to get there, instead of being like, oh, I already thought about it, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
I think can be, create some of that technical debt. Ooh, maybe that's a shout out to our next topic. Could it be?
Tech debt. Oh my gosh.
Or like you say, create these temporary, manual, semi-permanent solutions that then end up living on for years and years and years.
Yeah. Ooh. So I had a good relationship with one of our support executives, right? And every time he'd come to me with a problem, eventually we defined it as, just tell me what you want to report on, and then I will help reverse engineer it. Mm-hmm. And then we can come to an understanding. We can build a business process and we can enforce it. And that really helped him complete, the list of specifications, the list of requirements that he would come to me with, because he was very reporting metric driven. Now, I think for other people with softer skills, like sales comes to me with like a question of like, hey, why is it that, you need to lock down this, but you won't lock down that? Or why can't I edit this when this is happening? What is the reason behind it? What is the soft skill issue that I'm running up against when I'm trying to perform XYZ task? So for example, quoting, I've locked down, the stage field. You can only generate a quote when the stage is at, this level, and you need to follow an approval process to get there.
Okay.
Sales isn't like that.
Sure. No, I want to do what I want to do.
Edit the record. Yeah, they want to be able to edit the record and edit any field in the record. And because I'm enforcing it with a validation rule, which I know. But yeah, it's what I could do with the time.
Sure. And there's a balance, right? You have to,
right,
like you were saying earlier, you have to kind of come to have a philosophy or an architecture, like design plan decision to stick to, because there are going to be those scenarios of maybe I trust this salesperson to do it, but would someone new know how to do it, and can I help them not screw it up?
Yeah, how can I make it so that this not only benefits me and reduces the amount of training I have to do, it also helps somebody who's just getting into the system quote something.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
Running into like, well, maybe I shouldn't discount it by this much, right. What you're looking at as far as your partner custom object goes, you're giving some guidelines on how the sales process works. And I think that defining where you're going to put that, whether it's a custom object or an approval process, is definitely part of your, admin journey.
I do think too that a lot of this build versus buy kind of goes back to the complexity of your project and or your org and users, right? If I'm not using CPQ, the idea of adding something on my opportunity is a little bit different or less huge feeling than, if I'm working on some other like custom object thing that's maybe like on its own little island and not connected to opportunities. Or if I've only got 5 salespeople, it's a little bit less involved. If I, do it in production, or I, move the cheese around a little bit. I need that saying I feel like is outdated now. I need some who moved my cheese.
Move the cheese.
Who moved my cheese was a whole book.
That's totally relevant.
But, it's a little bit different than if you've got larger teams with, like you said, more developed training materials you may have to update and more like complexity. I do think that there's certainly growth in that area as your org gets more complex, and that's a larger factor in your decisions.
Right. Yeah. The complexity of the org, whether this will scale or not, I think those are all very relevant questions. Yeah, it's very interesting.
and it's what I like about this conversation is that there's no right answers, right?
There really isn't.
And even in the same scenario, we might pick different paths and sometimes be right and wrong. I really think it just is about an awareness of understanding, if you have the budget to buy something, even if you do, evaluating vendors, which I think is a whole separate conversation, but
oh my gosh, yeah.
Understanding.
And let's not even mention the app exchange. I don't even want to. Yeah.
Well, or are there? Does the complexity of how it might grow might mean that you grow? If a partner already has some kind of tiered offerings, maybe it does make sense. And that's another way you can we talked earlier about growing your own solution in kind of phases. You can kind of grow with a partner in phases as well, if you're on the same kind of train track going in the same direction.
Right. Right.
It's
interesting.
And even at my last job, we made a really concerted effort. Even when we did custom development things, we were doing a lot of stuff in Experience Cloud with custom components, building it with admin, like custom metadata type dependencies involved, so that I as an admin could make modifications, pause triggers, do a lot of different things. So building the custom pieces with admin management in mind, instead of building myself into a dev corner that only a dev could manage. Right. So,
oh my gosh, So
you know,
true.
even within build and buy, I think there's like, we could have a whole other episode maybe about each one, but.
Ooh, we should. Because I have some thoughts on like the different types of integrations you can use and like what that kind of evaluation is like for an admin.
Ooh.
So for me, you know, back when we were like, Salesforce is the center of our big data wheel. Back in that day, I was very much like, all right, if we are going to build an integration, I don't want to have to deal with APIs because I'm not comfortable working with them personally. You know, I don't know how to write them. I am confused. Nowadays, I'm a little more comfortable, but back then, definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, you know, prefer and I would heavily weight, you know, integrations that created that were managed package into or unmanaged package into our org, because then I knew I could automate it.
Okay. Interesting.
And I could force the API to push records to the outside system or pull records from the outside system. And then I wouldn't have to have a license for each user in each system. I could keep Salesforce users in one system and I could keep, you know, Freshdesk users in another system.
Right.
For example. We did actually do an evaluation like this last year for Zendesk versus Freshdesk. And when they, you know,
whichever
were
desk
evaluating
you
it,
might need.
which desk do you want? Do you want the Zendesk or do you want the Freshdesk? So when they brought up Freshdesk, I was like, okay, I can automate this. I can build stuff in Flow. I can, you know, make it trigger a record into Freshdesk very easily. And I can automate all of your support processes that currently exist in Salesforce into Freshdesk. So I prefer this one. They went with Zendesk, where I can do nothing.
You don't always win. It's a good example.
I mean, like, I can send an email to case.
There you go.
I could probably figure out outbound messages eventually.
Now they're in Flow, so I mean,
now they're
where you'd like to live. Well, clearly you're wonderful, and we could talk about Salesforce things for all the minutes. I'm
so grateful that you asked me to talk about this.
Yay! I love it. We did talk about, you know, your leveraging your own internal resources and skills that you have as part of that build decision. So that takes us to our add minute segment to wrap up our session today. So when you take an add minute for yourself, is there something you've read recently or seen that you wanted to share that helped, you know, learn something that maybe you'll use soon enough for your next build?
Yes, actually, it's kind of like really nerdy and esoteric. So, I mean, I already knew about you don't want to hard code IDs into your automations, but this article from Jen W. Lee, her Salesforce blog, just gives such a good summary explanation around why. Like, you can kind of figure out for yourself why. Right. But not only does she give you the why, she gives you, like, what are your alternatives, right? Because sometimes you just don't want to do a lookup to find the correct record type. You just don't. You want to just put that record type ID in there. You want to put that user ID in there and then deal with the repercussions when the user gets deprecated or when the record type gets deprecated.
Or it makes sense, again, if as a new admin, it makes sense at the time. They let me do it. So
absolutely. It doesn't stop me.
Right.
When I do that. Like, it doesn't give me a, hey, probably don't.
Maybe not the best.
And to just touch on the repercussions, you know, you have to fix it later. So
I love it.
And it sucks. And it sucks when you have to fix it later because it's annoying. I do not like to do it. I've done it a lot in the past. So,
Your confession.
Mea culpa. Anyway, I will send this link to you. It is so good. And it covers actually custom metadata and some custom settings and how you can use those to create high functionality around IDs.
Reusable
and
chunks.
using IDs in your automations.
I like it. Mine cool. is a Medium article by Gordon Lee about kind of, I won't say radical idea, but I think when people are getting started, the idea of go volunteer at a nonprofit is kind of a common thing people say, right? And
really, yeah,
right. Now that you know, it sounds like, no, don't do that, right? Like, I don't want brand new drivers volunteering to drive limos that's not a good analogy, right? But like,
no, that's a good analogy.
You know, so
volunteering to drive anyone.
Right. So he made some great points about the idea is you want to get work experience, tangible experience to be able to differentiate yourself. And he gives some great examples of using a dev org and building things and projects about your own life that then can translate, especially if you build out through Experience Cloud. You could have a recruiter, go to your community, your experience, I guess that's so weird for me. Your org, right? And see what you've built and engage with something you've built. Because even if you do work at a nonprofit, you might leave them some spaghetti that they're going to have to unwind and deal with after you're gone. But B, you can't necessarily promote the things about those projects in the same way as you could something that you own. And one of the things I like to recommend is thinking about things in your daily life, right? Just like he's talking about that you can model. Even, I don't know if you've seen the show This Is Us, but you've got multiple main characters over multiple seasons and multiple phases of their lives and how they all interact, right? And so taking an example from a show like that, and how would I data model that? How would I track those characters versus episodes versus ages versus events, key events that happen?
I like it.
To try and understand, like, to unwind, like, from babies to the end, that's not the order they go in, but just thinking of drawing it, like you said, drawing on the wall, right, with your little tiny font. But just showing that you can think through those things and understand what the tools are and what options you have, I think is really cool. So I really liked that article.
Yeah.
And we'll post a link to that as well. So
I really like that too. And you know what is great about that as well? In your dev org, say that you come up with an idea that's applicable to your existing business. You can always build it in your dev org, create an unmanaged package and install it in your prod org. And to be honest, it's something that I've definitely been doing a lot more of, so that, my ideas can be documented in more than one place. And if somebody ever needed my assistance with it, like if I ever moved on from this job, and somebody takes over my position and calls me up one day and is like, hey, what the heck were you thinking? I can actually go back and say, yes, this is the heck that I was thinking. And here's why I might have wanted to have done it differently. But here's what your problem is.
That's why it made sense. And good luck to you.
And good luck.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on Serious Insights. I think we had some good serious insights today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Serious Insights for Admins. Don't forget to get your 14-day free trial and free yourself from the drudgery of manual data entry. Start now by visiting cirrusinsight.com. That's Cirrus, CIRRUS, insight.com. And I'll see you next time.